Thank you very much for coming. Those of you that came in earlier, I've just given you some hop samples. Take those home and have some brewing. Enjoy yourself. They're all a bit random, but they're left over from trade shows that we had last year, but they're commercial things that you can buy from either Get a Brewed or from Jonathan Waves in the back. If you go upstairs and see Jonathan Get a Brewed or go and see Rob and Martin from Malt Miller, they'll hook you up with some of our hops. So this presentation is about don't get caught up in looking for a variety all the time. Look, there's other aspects to hops, and that's really how you should pick the hops for your beer. So just an introduction to me. This is the same couple of slides if you watched my presentation yesterday, but it's relatively relevant to the same thing. So I work for Bath House Group, or simply Hops, part of Bath House Group. We supply 50% of the hop products in the world to lots of different ranging sizes of breweries, all the way from sort of like the guys here to Lervig in Norway, Andy, wherever he's gone, we supply hops to him. And also, like we were saying, the smaller producers for you guys for the homebrew repacking. Myself, I've been at Simply Hops for over a year. The reason I was butting in with the malting presentations earlier is I worked at Simpson's Malt for about 6-7 years before. Changed to hops because sexier. But yeah, I got a master's degree from Heriot-Watt, so I pretend to know a lot about brewing as well, and distilling sometimes. And my favourite beer is Faith, or it was yesterday, but I've just been drinking the North Sea on cask, and that's my new favourite Northern Monk beer. So what are hops? So down here I've got some Hula Melon 18 crop. If you pass it round between you, have a rub and a sniff. Just grab a handful and pass it on, and it's a little bit awkward, but you can see what a hop cone looks like. Hopefully most of you will know what hops are, that's why you've come. But essentially what we've got is a flower which contains a yellow sticky substance called lupulin, and also inside of that are a load of other oils, and that's really where you get your flavour and your aroma from. It's the oil and the lupulin that you're really bothered about. There's a little bit of oil in the leaf, but it's mostly the yellow lupulin hidden here in the lupulin glands that we're after. That plays, as we discussed yesterday, it plays into effect whether you use pellets or leaf or other extract products, etc. It varies how much lupulin you use and how you use it, but generally we're just going to cover the general sort of flavours and how everything gets made up today. So, as you can see, sort of from this picture, if you take your forefinger and your thumb and you split the top in half, you'll see in the centre this lovely sticky stuff. If you've already rubbed it, I'm sorry, I can't pass you it back, but this has got quite a lovely bit of lupulin in it. The alpha's not too high, but you know, for a European variety, it's quite nice. But inside that lupulin, you've got alpha acid, which is what gives you the bitterness when it isomerises in the kettle. You've got beta acid, which just is there. It doesn't really do anything. If you're going to do dry hop, what people in pro level will ask for is a higher beta, because it's insoluble, so it will drop out. You won't have bitterness from dry hop with a higher beta, whereas alpha acid, although it's more soluble if it isomerises in the kettle, it will still possibly give you some bitterness, as some people discovered yesterday when they tried to drink the extract that we handed out, and they couldn't taste anything but alpha acid for 6 hours. And then also we've got the essential oil fractions, that they're really what give you the aroma and the flavour. There's a massive map of how much they're made up of, and it's too much to go into that. And that's why we developed something else to teach people better how to analyse hops. So what you've just been doing is you've been sniffing and rubbing, but some of you may or may not have done that before. If you've used pellets, you might not have touched whole cones. But essentially it's all a lot of personal skill and a lot of experience that really teaches you how and how to pick the aromas and the flavours up from that, and how to apply it to brewing. And it's a bit complicated for everybody at every tier, be you a master's or a PhD or a degree level. You're still not going to quite understand exactly what combinations and what hops you need, and is that more wine-like, or is it more citrusy, or is it fruity, or what fruit is it, or it's very complicated to work out all the different compounds in there to work out what the flavours and the aromas are. So we've come up with something that's a little bit easier, called the Hopzest tasting aroma profiles. And essentially we took a load of perfumers and flavourists and brewers. This is a group-wide thing, so throughout the globe all of our products are branded in this same way. And you get red berries, vegetal, woody, menthol, and essentially what you're doing is you're starting to smell and taste hops the same way that you would drink and smell beer. And that makes it a lot easier of how to pick hops. So here we have all the flavours, so we've got some floral, so that would be like elderflower and chamomile blossom, etc. Citrus, grapefruit, lemon, lime, etc. They're pretty obvious what those ones are. Sweet fruits would be like bananas, or like apricots, peach, passion fruit. Green fruits, pear, apple, red berries, and essentially you can kind of see what's there. I'd not go over it for too long, otherwise we miss out the interesting stuff. But we've categorised it like this, so it makes it much easier to apply. And then when you look at it as hops, then we've got Ella is very floral, Mandarina is very citrus, Mosaic is very much these sweeter fruits, Blanc is more of a green fruit, Polaris is menthol, Relax is a bit more woody, Triskel is this creamy, Monroe is more red berries, Sarts is a classic herbal, Taurus a bit spicy, Hercules grassy, and then Summit a bit more vegetal. Some people would also attribute Mosaic to being a bit vegetal and oniony, but that's where people are talking about this thing, but you might not be able to pick that up until someone says, oh, it's one of these categories. And so that's kind of why they brought it in. So then, how does that then translate into how you apply it? Well, we have a product called the Harvest Guide. So every year, for each variety, we create spider diagrams that cover sort of the aroma and flavour of what we've got for each hop. And that's what we're going to go through today, is to kind of show, well, I can't buy a hop, or I've got a hop and it's not tasting right, or I want to make a flavour profile for a beer. Well, you look at the Harvest Guide and you'll see where the diagrams are. It's a shame the light isn't quite good for this, but essentially what we've got here is this is Equinox, which most of you, I have tried to hand out some pellets to you. If you do sniff it later, you'll be able to see that it is a bit more of a sweet fruit and some citrus there. Sort of, and slightly red berry, but then you also got a bit of spiky, but I can't remember what that says. Green grassy, of course, yeah. And then into the heart, so this is the generic sort of profile for the hop. You then also get like some flavour descriptors, like we were going for before. And then this would be the harvest year at the bottom, so we analyse it and you can compare it harvest years. And this changes. So in other years, you might find that the temperature and the weather and the harvest, particularly in an 18 crop, we found in Europe that the heat took all the oil out of the hops and affected the alpha level. And people were trying to brew with beer with hops that weren't tasting what they thought it was going to be, so then they had to try and find something else. An example of this is Sarts, where traditionally you kind of get a big citrus hit, slightly woody, grassy notes, but in 18 crop it was all grassy, all sort of herbal and woody, and none of that classic sort of aroma flavour, so lager was tasting like English bitter, and that's not right. So you had to try and find another hop to use. But then the other end of the scale is that you get growing and seasonal conditions where something blossoms, and this is Kazbek. And what you've got is normally you'd have quite a citrusy hit, but it's still quite subtle compared to US hops. But then in last year's harvest, it was a big punch, huge citrus notes, and very comparable to US varieties. And that's why you start to see more craft breweries using it in hop-forward IPA, be it New England IPA, using Czech or German hops, because the harvest for some of them changed. And that's down to them looking at this guide and going, oh, more fruity this year. I'll try that one out. So another important thing is regional availability. So if you can't get Cascade, some people will say, oh, you can always get Cascade because it's grown in 14 countries. Well, yeah, it is, but none of them are the same. Each growing region will affect its terroir, be it soil, pH, sun, etc., etc. The same as it is wine, one Cascade is not the same as each other. You can't really see it, unfortunately, but all the cones look almost exactly the same, and that's how people will look at it. But what you find in the UK and Belgium is it will go really earthy and woody, like the beer. Central Europe, you get a little bit more floral and spicy and some citrus notes. And then with Australia, we get a massive sort of tropical hit, but it will never quite go back to what it was in the other region. So if you ever get to use English Cascade, don't bore any with us, but it smells like classic English hops, Fuggles, Goldings. It's not Cascade like you would think as a big citrusy bomb, or, well, not bomb, is it? It's 1970s hops, it's not like that. But so as we can see from this, so here we've got US Cascade that everyone thinks it should be, and it's quite citrusy, and there's a bit of red berry there, and there's like the classic kind of green and herbal. Then you go to Germany, and sort of these more fruity notes drop off, and it becomes a more sort of rounded, mellow, not very intense, but still a little bit sort of lemony and a little bit berried. And then we go to the extreme of Australia, and these notes really mellow out a little bit, and you get a big sort of red berry, currant, mango, all of those kind of flavours coming out of it. Very, very similar to Vic Secret, but which is harder to get. So if you were looking, oh, I can't buy Vic Secret, Australian Cascade. Australian Cascade, sadly, is, I say that, but Little Creatures are selling more and more beer, and they are the reason that it exists in Australia, so they buy more and more of it, and it makes it slightly less available. But if you can get that, you need to be looking at these things and going, oh yeah, okay, that other hop from that region's got this other thing, but I wouldn't normally attribute it to that. And that kind of lays on to my next point about spot market availability. Here's Simply Hop's website, probably not relevant to most of you because we only sell in 5 kilo packs. But Jonathan over there will agree with this, that the same hops here that I've got kind of available and haven't got available is kind of the same as what you guys have. There's not any Galaxy available on the website. There might be some Mosaic, but it's probably unlikely. Well, but there are other hops like Callista available, or Topaz, and a hop blend we've got called Yellow Sub. Like, they're more available. And what people need to think is, don't be held back by the name of the variety. Yes, if you can get it, great, use it. But you want to make that beer again for a competition that you've just used that hop. How do you do it? So, Galaxy being that example, we've already got next year's harvest, before it's grown, sold out. With 2021, 80% sold. And it isn't going to appear on the spot market anytime soon. Like, there's no way that this hop's going to be like, oh, I used it a lot before. Luckily, we have got, with these guys, they do contract like the breweries do. And they will have availability for you, but it will sell out probably quite quickly. And you will come across the same problem at home brew as you would with big beer, where those hops are just not going to be around anymore. You know, and part of the other reason for that is people don't realise how much of it's grown. It was quite nice of Stan Hieronymus to talk about this about 4 or 5 weeks ago, where he was saying that actually in one state there's like about 12 varieties that are grown in Washington alone, and all of them are grown more than there is of Galaxy. Like, they don't grow a huge amount of it, but people love it so much, so you've got to learn to kind of look for other things. And there's sort of the diagram of it. We still do this even though you can't buy it, which is a bit of a shame, but that helps when we go on to the next kind of products. So here we have Callista and Topaz, and they work quite well together because, as you could kind of see from here, we're looking for a big berry currant hit with a good bit of citrus, but then also a little bit of a spicy note. But we're mainly looking down here for this berry currant green fruit note, and you look at these two, and there we have a big berry currant note with a little bit of the spice. It is a parent of the hop, which kind of helps. But over here we've got a nice sweet fruit and citrus, and you bring those two together and you will get not exactly Galaxy, but kind of towards that. And then here, Mosaic. We have a Facebook page for all of us brewing professionals, so when we forget what we learned at university, we can ask someone else. You probably learn more from BrewTube than you will from this, because there are a lot of really stupid questions every day. I don't know if any of you are on that. It just makes it funny. But here we have, so there was some quite basically all the way through the year. Oh no, I can't buy Mosaic. Where do I get Mosaic? Oh, where's my Mosaic? Like, well, again, we have sold out 6 months before it's picked of Mosaic. And into 2020, it's 98% sold, and Jonathan's probably sold the rest of it in the last 2 days while you've been here. So it is, becoming more scarce. Malt Miller are struggling to get some from next year for this harvest. For maybe the home brewers will have the same problem as the brewers. It's difficult. But again, look at the diagram. There are other hops out there that have some nice sweet fruit and citrus. So you can look there really for those things, and then that's how we lead over to Yellow Sub. So Yellow Sub was originally set up as a blend. I meant to get some samples, but unfortunately they weren't given to me in time. So you could compare this, but by rubbing and sniffing. But it's originally set up as a replacement for Amarillo. So in 2015, Amarillo tasted of onions. And no matter what you did with it, it tasted of onions. And people were like, how am I going to make my West Coast IPA? Remember those days? What we're going to do, so we created a blend to match the profile. Now Amarillo is less of that problem, but with other West Coast and classic other hops from the US not being less and less available, you kind of have to think, well, what attributes does it have that are very similar? And you can see here that it's quite big on the citrus and the sweet fruit. A little bit more on the red berry note, but it's not too far off if you could get it in the right place. But there is this big spiciness and herbalness. Now, fine, it's not an exact match, but with the larger attributes there, you're not too far away. You could find a substitute, maybe add it in as a Whirlpool edition or as a late edition, and you would help with a bit of that evaporative loss of the oils, and you'd probably lose some of that note. As a dry hop, you'd have to look through and find some other hops that work quite well with it, or maybe just use another hop and give up. But essentially, what you're doing is you're looking for these sort of factors. Because I'm actually a little bit ahead of where I thought I was. I might go to this bit anyway, but essentially, so this guide is available on the Bathhouse Group website. You can all download it for free. It covers not every variety that we have in the portfolio, but it is a good start for people to kind of start thinking about that. And it's essentially, if you go on the group website, you find this media library bit, that takes you towards a load of downloadable stuff, and then you just have to look through for the harvest guide. It's relatively straightforward. It's about a 2 megabyte file, easy enough to download. And that was kind of where we were going, but I have also got some samples to rub for the cascades. But I didn't want to talk for too long, so these are pellets rather than... So these are both German. If you guys take one of those. Pass. So if you just, these are 16 crop hops, but you just take a couple of pellets or sniff the bag and pass it on. You'll notice there that you're probably all quite familiar with American Cascade, but this is much more mellow. This is more like marmalade and citrus floral, kind of like we were talking about before. I clicked off of it, sorry. Can I click it and... Just press the thing and I'll find which slide I need to be on. Hey.
Sorry, not much.
No.
No.
Hey.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. Where were we? Okay, so if you come to here, you kind of... It is still very citrusy, but it's so much softer than you would get with American Cascade. And that's kind of the thing is, you need to look through that. Don't go, oh, Cascade, can't buy that Cascade, bought this Cascade, and then you'll go, well, that's not what I wanted. You need to look more towards the flavours. I actually got some American Cascade as well, so you can now immediately, I've only got one pack, so kind of if you just want to. But that's, also these are older crop years, so that's 16 crop. I don't know if you've used older hops, but we cold store everything. So even if you can't get something in a fresher crop year, you probably find it in an older crop year it will work relatively as well. If you buy it from us. I don't know about other merchants, whether or not they do that, but with this American, you can really get that big spike of citrus, but it's definitely not in the other one. When it gets round to you guys, I'm sorry I didn't bring as many samples, but yeah, that's it. Questions, really?
You've got that guide, but is it quite historic? So does it go all the way back to 2017 hops now, and there's something coming through?
Yeah, so it's from like 2014, I think.
Okay.
It's not really old. There are other guides to harvests on that website back to 1898, but I don't know if you'll need those.
You never know, that'd be sweet, man.
Anyone else? Yeah.
Old story. You've got hops that you bought a couple of years ago and sat in your freezer unopened. Are they still
Unopened, or like opened or unopened?
I've got some that are unopened. Some that are opened and re-sealed.
Give them a rub and sniff, it'll probably be alright. So long as they weren't too exposed to oxygen, you should be okay. But if they're completely sealed, yeah, you'd probably be surprised. Like we opened some 2011 Sarts at work, and it smelled better than the 18 crop. Like, but it had just been sat in a fridge for what was that, 7-8 years? Like, anyone else? Yep.
Just how bad was the 18 crop? Because you mentioned SARS, but SARS from last year was really bad. I've had to use like double right?
Yeah, so.
The classic of having SARS. I probably shouldn't be thinking, maybe I should replace it with something else.
Yeah, Sterling's a good alternative, which is US grown Sarts, but they can't call it that, and it's slightly different. But yeah, so Sarts was 40% short of what they thought it was going to be on the yields. And as a result, any spare stock that anyone had from previous years as a merchant got taken by the big breweries because they couldn't make their standard lagers. And a lot of German varieties were 10% short, and a lot of English stuff was 10 to 15% short, and it's just heat. But I mean, that's the variability. But then but that sort of teaches you that you need to not do that and go, oh, I have to use that hop, because there's a load of other alternatives out there. I mean, Sarts has been stolen all over the world, so like Tettnanger's quite similar. It's not exactly the same, but genetically exactly the same. Sterling's a great match, but again, because it's grown in America, it's more citrusy. If you use a New Zealand or an Australia, I can't remember what the Australian version of it is, but if for one of the New Zealand ones, you still get a bit more of a citrusy tropical note on it. It never match exactly, but
Any new varieties coming through you excited about?
yeah. Sabro's quite cool, but that's also extremely unavailable. HBC 692 is a cool new one. Colonel just brewed a beer with it. It's relatively available. It's like Equinox, but without the pithiness. Like that astringent bitterness. Yeah, it's really cool. HBC 472 is the sister of Sabro. That's big coconut hit. Like if you wanted to do a pina colada beer, that'd be it. I would suggest to use 472 and something else fruity rather than using Sabro, because Sabro's coconut is like really, really subtle, but it's still there. That's about it, really. We don't sell English hops, so there's some other English hops that are cool, but yeah, that's it. Anyone else?
We talked yesterday about the kind of, so when they're doing these tests for finding these flavours, they're doing it with whole hop cones, right?
Yeah.
But then once you start to process them, yesterday you were saying they lose some of the certain characteristics potentially. So does that guide take into account, does it say like Cascade cone, Cascade pellet, T90?
Yeah, so this is like general to pellet products and leaf. For BBC hops, because they're enriched, you get more, really, never less. You also get notes on hops that you wouldn't think were there. So in the guide, like Columbus might say, it's a bit citrusy, and you'll go, I've never smelled citrus in Columbus. And then you try the BBC palette, and you're like, wow, there it is. Yeah, this is kind of generally for T90 and for whole leaf, but for BBC, it's slightly different. You just got to think more, essentially. That's all I'm allowed to say. Thank you very much.